Howdy, everybody. Bob Tallman for No Spin Rodeo. No politics, no BS, just hard-hitting news and rodeo commentary from two of the most trusted sources in our sport. Kendra Santos, Tommy Joe Lucia. Listen up. Here we go.
Welcome, No Spinners. This is episode 30 of No Spin Rodeo. This is a special feature episode. We're pretty excited about this. I'm joined with Greg Teagarden, our technical director and producer, and the voice, the queen, Kendra Santos. And we have some special guests, and we have a special episode today. So we'll get started because we want to get we got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. And so we'll just kick it off with good morning, everybody. Good morning, Greg. Good morning, Kendra. How are you?
I'm heavily caffeinated. It's been a long night, or is it a short night? No sleep. But there's not enough coffee for what's going on in Elk City, Oklahoma right now. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Greg, everything cool in your world?
Yeah, everything's good here. Just spent 5 hours at the DMV yesterday and didn't get a driver's license, so I'm pretty pumped about moving to North Carolina.
You got to study that book. You got to study the book harder. Kendra, let's get going here. What do we got? Let's get some quick hits in rodeo news, and then we'll get rolling here.
All right. Well, in rodeo news, I do have two quick hits of note. Our 2023 NFR Pickup Man and PRCA Pickup Man of the Year, Josh Edwards, who retired after this year's American from being a pickup man. He just finished third in the 2024 Mongol Derby in Mongolia, which is a 621-mile endurance race on wild Mongolian horses. And he completed that course in 9 days. And I'm just going to say, I mean, wild cowboy, not very many people would even take that on. So that's amazing. And congratulations to Josh. He made Cowboys really proud over there. So the second thing I was going to note is that PBR bull rider Brady Olison had a bad wreck at the event in Austin, Texas recently, and it required neck fusion surgery of his C3 and 4 vertebrae, and it was a forced retirement, career-ending injury. So prayers for him and thoughts for him as he figures out his next chapter, because it was, unexpected and sudden. So,
yeah, I was at that event. It was, and I'm involved with the Western Sports Foundation, and they're talking to them. It was just one of those injuries where, when you see it happen, it's not as obvious how critical it was. I mean, it was the fact that he was taken out on a board, but I mean, in real time, I was like, well, what? How he didn't get, so it was just, it looked like just one of those things that can happen. But I know that the Rattlers organization, I talked to the general manager, they're supporting him, Western Sports Foundation, the rodeo community's pulling together for him, because it looks like he'll be potentially looking for a new career path. So.
Okay. Well, the rodeo news that everyone's talking about right now is the Butler family's catastrophic loss of horses. It's now 70 and counting horses lost. It's hard to put into words. I saw a comment Donnie Gay made. This is the greatest tragedy I've ever seen in rodeo. Anyway, this is a 95-year-old breeding program started in 1929 by Elra, Jake, and Lynn Butler. The dynasty has been carried on by Elra's grandson Benny and his son Rhett. And I purposely sat back on this, talking to a lot of people. But yesterday and again this morning, I talked to Dr. Greg Venneklassen, who's the man. And I mean, he handles Butlers, all sorts of other people's Calgary's horses. He's the guy who clones horses. He's a special friend to rodeo, who will go down as an icon in our history, because he was a game changer. But he said that the early reporting that the Butler's horses were accidentally fed cattle feed are false. The actual situation is that a load of horse feed came in, but it had monensin in it, which is a cattle drug that is found in some cattle feed. The brand name is rumensin. In small amounts of this drug is fatal to horses. And this particular load of horse feed had huge amounts of this drug in it. Somehow, human error along the way somewhere, enough that it would have killed cattle also. So it's so the loss is hard to put into words. The only bucking mare that's still alive is Black Cat, who bucked at the end of her last year, and she's alive because she was at Clausen's Timber Creek Veterinary Hospital in Canyon, Texas, when the feed was delivered. And the only killer bee baby of this very famous breeding program that's still alive is only alive because of refusing to eat the feed. So 5 generations went into this bloodline, and many of the program stars are gone. And a lot of the details on it are purposely being held at this time for obvious reasons. And whatever the Butler family wants is what we will respect. But the show will go on this weekend at the Butler's hometowner in Elk City, Oklahoma, with help from people like Sammy Andrews and Steve Gilbert, who are bringing in stock. And the way our rodeo family rallies in situations like this is something to be very proud of. More on this when we can, but we're all thinking about the Butlers right now. That's for sure. So I will leave it at that for now. I guess we should just roll straight into this special episode, which is Instant Replay and Rodeo.
This episode was kind of spurred on by feedback. I did challenge for some feedback, and we definitely got some. And in the last episode and continually, I think I push to impress on our rodeo community the need to continue to move forward. And it was just brought up that maybe we weren't actually recognizing some of the things moving forward in the industry. And so we thought this was a good time to bring on a couple guests and talk about the history and the future of instant replay as it relates to competition in rodeo. And so at this time, we want to welcome our 2 guests. I'll let Kendra start, and then I'll take the second. We'll welcome them, and we'll get this thing started.
Okay, well, Bobby Mote's an easy introduction. Four-time world champion bareback rider, Pro Rodeo Hall of Famer, and currently serves as the president of the World Champions Rodeo Alliance. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with y'all about this, and I'm getting maybe ahead of myself. And the other side of this conversation is Steve Knowles representing the pro rodeo. And I just want to say right out of the gate, Steve was a pro rodeo full-time official, I think pretty much for my whole career. And of all those guys, he was one of the guys that was always respected. He was always level-headed. He was always, made the right call, did his best to make the right call. And from what I've seen, has devoted his life to rodeo. And then most recently is the director of rodeo administration. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct. Yes.
And, that's neither of those are easy jobs. I mean, people usually only talk to you when they have an issue. And in a lot of cases, especially in his role now, maybe he wasn't even responsible for making the decision that he's got to do cleanup on, And so I just want to preface anything that I say with the fact that I respect him. I respect his position. I respect the PRCA and all the pro rodeo's done and continues to do for rodeo. And we gotta realize in this conversation that they're in a tough spot because they sanction, between 500 and 600 rodeos of all sizes, from the national finals or a rodeo Houston down to a small county fair. And the needs of the committees, the contractors, and the athletes are varying depending on what the situation is. And so, like I've this is an issue that I'm passionate about. Obviously, I'm passionate about trying to make things better for athletes. And so I guess maybe this is where I start is, you mentioned I'm the president of the WCRA. We started that about 6 years ago. We're a for-profit sports property, and the main difference in that is that our customer is the athlete. Every decision that we make is based on improving opportunities for rodeo athletes, and we believe that if the competitive opportunities and the conditions are best for the athletes, then the entertainment value will be there for the person who bought the ticket or the television viewer. And so, that's where we're coming from. And just in all fairness, the PRCA is coming from a slightly different position because they're a membership run organization, membership owned and run. And so things have a procedure that they have to go through. And we can get into this later, but if we see a need or a rule or a policy that needs to be changed, we can pivot and make that change pretty quickly. Obviously, the ramifications of the PRCA making quick rule changes and policy changes is different because they have a lot of different things to consider. And so I just wanted to just right out of the gate be able to, preface everything that we say with that, because I think it's important to understand that it's just not a overnight decision.
Well, Bobby, thanks for you took all my lines for introducing Steve Knowles. Appreciate that. But I'll go with what bits and pieces Mr. Mote left for me. Hey, welcome, the Florida native, 21 years judging as a pro official, high credibility. In 21, he was named the director of rodeo administration. I understand he did have a rodeo career. The only highlight I could find was that he was the Silver Spurs bull riding champion. Now, are there other highlights to your pre-judging career?
There's a lot of highlights, but probably most of them we can't discuss on this public forum. But no, and thank you, Tommy Joe, and thank you, Bobby and Kendra, and good morning, Greg. That is true. I think Bobby's whole career, we were probably together a lot. And Bobby, just to say, he was almost a 5-time world champion, as I recall. And I remember in the 10th go-round, a Kessler horse might have bucked him off like at 6 seconds, or we'd be looking at a 5-time world champion. That might have been your first opportunity, I believe, wasn't it, Bobby?
Yeah, it was. So, order up in the 10th round and spurred over.
Yeah. My history with Bobby goes way back, and I respect Bobby, and I agree. In my rodeo career, Tommy Joe was very, very mediocre. So I'm not saying I was a good judge, but I probably wasn't a great bull rider either. So I'm probably, the older I get, the better I think I was. But, and just to follow up with Bobby, we're all on the same team. We're in the rodeo business. The WCRA is in the rodeo business. We align on a lot of topics. We share the athletes. It's not, I don't look at the WCRA as an enemy at all. I just look at them as a co-worker, more or less.
We all want what's best for rodeo. That's for sure. Well, should we just dive into a few questions? Bobby, if you'll take this one first, tell us about the use of instant replay in the WCRA, how long you've used it, and when you use it.
So actually, my experience with instant replay dates back to 2016, and Tommy Joe deserves as much credit as anybody, because when the ERA, which was a previous effort by the rodeo athletes to do something different in rodeo, one of the main things that they were passionate about was implementing instant replay. Tommy Joe has Piranha Entertainment. He and Greg, they've got all the technical know-how to implement it. And then furthermore, Tommy Joe, you could tell us, but when the PBR was, they started instant replay in 2006, I believe. And so you were there through a lot of that. And so, anytime you try to start anything new, there's going to be trial and error. And so it made sense to try to pull experience from people who have already done it. And so my experience started in the ERA in 2016, but when we started to write the rule book for the WCRA, it was a no-brainer. Of course, it needed to be in there, but all of our rules needed to be written from scratch. And so, through all of this, sort of the old saying is, you don't know what you don't know. You try to account for every single instance that could happen, but it's still, that doesn't cover everything. Rodeo is full of, who saw that coming type of situations. And so, at the heart of it, the goal has always been just to get the right call, and so again, like I mentioned earlier, we have the luxury of having one event at a time. And so that we can do a lot of planning. We have the same crew on site that can facilitate it, but I think that's a big piece of it. But we write the rules. We feel like we have the rules pretty well buttoned down, and then we go, as an example, we go to Kansas City in 2020. Chet Johnson in the short round has a really good horse that's retired now of Moxa's called Get Smart. Steve knows this horse. He turns out and rears out of there and starts bucking really fast. Well, Chet's like, I think he's last to go and ends up winning it. Well, like the second jump after he tries to hold the spur out, he slaps this horse. And it wasn't obvious. It was obvious during the replay that played in bowl and after the ride and on TV. And of course, every cowboy saw it, but the judges didn't see it. And like, it's easy to throw stones at those guys, but at the same time, they have a lot to keep track of, and it happens pretty fast. And when it's coming at you quick, like it would on a horse like that, you just need to miss something for a blink. And so if you're not sure of what you saw, it's pretty hard to throw a flag or not. And so we changed our rules right after that, our policies, to add that if any of the officials, the back judge or any of the officials in the arena, thinks that they saw a rule infraction, they can call for a challenge as well. And so in that case, it's nothing against Chet. Chet knew what happened. Everybody else knew what happened too, but the guy who won second should have won first. And so our policy wasn't perfect to begin with. It's not perfect now, but it was, we learned from that example. And so then we changed the rules and the policy going forward so that, if that should happen again, the back judge sees it, one of the other officials see it, they can challenge it, they can call for a replay, and then after that was a little bit of a uproar in rodeo for about a week or so. And Kendra, you wrote an article on it, basically us just, like, I think calling out and admitting when you screw up is good, because there's no sense in saying, no, we got it right, and everybody else saw it wrong. I think in that case, it was easy to say, look, and even the officials, when they saw it back, they're like, I didn't see that, but they didn't have the rules to support them to go, to one of them to challenge it. So, just a brief example of it going the wrong way and being able to pivot and make adjustments to the rules or policies.
Okay, totally appreciate it. And we'll get into some other examples here in a minute. Steve, I would love for you to take on the same basic question about the use of instant replay in the PRCA and where that stands.
Okay, and to begin with, where our outcry came from was last year at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo with Bo Cooper, when the barrier come off the calf, or the neck rope fell off the calf's neck early. We had large outcry over that. We got bashed pretty good. So we just thought maybe it's time to stop and think and try to put a plan together. And so we did. We didn't do anything, throughout the year until we got to the National Finals Rodeo last year. Then we done an experiment. We hired a company to come in, DV Sports. They specialize in review and replay. They do a lot of NCAA work in the basketball and NBA work and some football. So we brought them in. I believe the number was we used 15 to 16 different cameras, not counting the production cameras, separate cameras. So we had that feed. We had a person in there, and he documented every call, non-call and call made at the NFR, put a time frame on how long it would be before he could overturn the call, or if he could overturn it. And it gained us some very, very valuable information. And then Houston had a review this past year replay, but it was very small. It covered like 5 topics where you could look at. But what we learned at Houston, we used the production cameras, the TV cameras, and we figured out that we really can't do that. We're not getting the looks we need. We don't get the control of the video we need when the TV people are running it. So we kind of decided from here on out, we need a separate company to manage that. And I agree with Bobby. If you're wrong, put your hand up and admit to it and move on. There's no sense in trying to cover it up because there's no covering anything up in this sports today. There's too many cameras out there. So that's where we're at. We kind of got a little plan this year at the National Finals Rodeo, but it's not been voted on by the committee yet. So we will present that to the NFR committee next month. In just a couple of weeks, actually, and hope we can proceed with that.
So let me clarify that. The PRCA and your directors, they're all on board and have submitted a plan. And the last portion of that is the NFRC. Is that right? To vote on that?
That's correct, Tommy Joe. And it's not it's not a big, it's just the steps and the processes we have to take. And as Bobby said, our rule changing, it takes 2 years to change rules. Our rule book really handcuffs us on that. There is processes to expedite rule changes, and we do it occasionally, and usually it backfires on us when we do that. But yeah, we'll present this to the NFR committee, and half of those are PRCA people, and the other half are Las Vegas people, and we hope to get their nod of approval on this where we can proceed.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. When you do the research on instant replay, I do think it's kind of interesting that it was 1963, the first time television audiences saw a replay. Can you imagine if you're watching on a black and white TV with your rabbit ears and all of a sudden this was an Army-Navy game and the quarterback scored again? And all of the fans were like, what the hell just happened? Or am I losing it? And that was the first instant replay, and it was done for the consumers. And then what happened, which I think is what we're all saying, is that when you have everybody watching it and have the ability to watch it in slow motion, then it was only natural for the competition committees and the referees that are getting thrown under the bus because we have all these armchair quarterbacks watching it to have to implement that. And later on, we can get into implementation. But the camera angles and the stuff have always been a challenge. And Bobby mentioned it, there's 2 ways to look at this when I looked at some research, and I'll pitch it to you guys for comment. But, I think any 4 cameras that you have in any angle you have is better to review than just to say we're not going to do it. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to do it correctly, cameras that are directed specifically to look for the fouls and infractions of that discipline are fantastic. If you have the budget and can do that, and a whole separate directing and switching team, because in that point, they can be looking at replays and looking at stuff while the action's still happening. They can literally be reviewing in the moment. So that'll lead on to my next question. I get to ask the next question. Bobby, I'll start with Steve, and then we'll have Bobby kind of comment because this is interesting to me. As you look at the rules for utilizing instant replay, and Bobby, you mentioned you guys have went through a lot of different types of rules to figure this out, but can you highlight the rules, Steve, like how you guys would intend to use it? You said you're going to step into it. Here's what really interests me is that all of the viewers need to understand that non-caught calls aren't reviewable, right? So, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. The way we have 5 points we start with, and one of them I can just go through them real quick is competing before the barrier. It's a team rope and calf rope, and roping this deer or calf before you cross the plane, the barrier. Crossfire, that's always a controversial call. And then the jerk down at the NFR, it can be in no time. So that's a reviewable. And the mark out in the bareback in bronc riding, and then at the barrier malfunction. That's just the 5 points we want to start. If there's a non-call or no call, it's not reviewed. The only thing we're reviewing right now is the calls, and every call that's made will be reviewed in these 5 topics automatically. There's no challenges. You know, when you deal with the Las Vegas people, for instance, you know, they're big on production and timing. We had to be very careful not to interrupt that. So most of the calls we reviewed last year could have been changed within 6 to 7 seconds. And our review official is reviewing a spur out right away. He's already reviewing it before the whistle blows automatically. So our intention is not to interrupt the flow of the production or any of that or the competition. And if he can't make it by the time the next guy's getting ready to compete or competes, it's done. You know, it's clear that it's that tight where he can't overturn the call. And we also, between me and all of you and everybody else, we're going to have an official in there recording non-calls this year for just our use in the future. You know, it's a good way to rate officials and review officials, and we really haven't done that. So that's something we want to kick in this year also. And I forgot to tell you, as of now, I am acting supervisor of the officials, and that's temporary. We've had a change in staff, so I've took that on. I probably will be out of that position by the NFR, but that's what I hope anyway. So we are seeking that official, you know, the supervisor official now. But yeah, we just want to kind of ease into it. We didn't want to just create havoc at the NFR, you know. So that's where we're at on that.
That sounds good. Now, Bobby, then to jump off of his, in your format, you allow challenges. And help me understand, because it may have adapted. Can anybody there challenge? So in the PBR, the non-competitor can challenge, like his buddy can challenge. Is that the case in the WC? So a challenge, fans, in case you don't know, this is when someone can actually ask for a play to be reviewed. And what we just heard from Knowles is their intent is to be reviewing these plays, I say plays, competition efforts as they happen, which I think is fantastic. But in this case, Bobby, help us understand, how is a challenge used? Who all can, is in all disciplines, challenges are on the board, right? Any contestant can challenge. Is that correct?
Yeah, and like Steve noted, within our 3 pages of our challengeable calls in the rule book, they have to be a challengeable call. There has to be a rule infraction. It's not like, you didn't like my ride, I want you to look at it again. Like, you can't do that. And so, when I use the Chet Johnson example, so an official or another competitor in that discipline could call for a challenge if they saw something. That's not something that we've had happen to date. And like Steve had mentioned, we have a dedicated replay official who's, anytime there's an infraction, he's already reviewing it, so that if somebody does walk back and challenge it, we've already got a decision on it. So if it's the spur out, for instance, or it's a buck off time or any of those things, it's already been reviewed, it's already been timed. And so that helps with the flow of the event, because we don't want to just stop. That was like when we went to Rodeo Corpus Christi 5 years ago, or almost 5 years ago, that was one of the big, topics of debate with Boyd Paul Hamus and Donnie and everybody's just like, we're going to, we got to run this thing off like in 2 hours and we don't want to disrupt the flow. Well, the first year we had a dedicated replay official, Jimmy Adams, set up there and didn't do a thing. He was like having a fire extinguisher, and we never had a fire. But when you have a fire, you want to have a fire extinguisher. And so we didn't end up needing him the first year. The second year we had a couple of challenges, but it didn't disrupt the flow. But what we found is that the in-arena audience got a little education on what it is. Because, if everybody's listened to the intro of the bareback ride and you got to have the Justin boots over the point of the shoulders, the first jump out, and let's go. If you're not a rodeo fan, you don't even know what that means. And so the fact that when you when there's a challenge and it is replayed in the arena and it's explained, it gives it gives that announcer the opportunity to explain, this is the rule and this is why. Okay, and so now the fan becomes a little bit more educated. Now, do we want that to happen 5 times during performance? No, and most likely that's not the case. Our experience is probably the number one thing that's challenged is buck off time, like in the bull riding. Probably about the same in the PBR, same thing. I mean, that's the one that's the closest. The guy's clock in his head is running faster than the clock in the arena, and sometimes not. And so, but like as an example, we have in the tie down rope, a broken barrier is reviewable. We have a GoPro camera on the line, so you can see right the minute the horse hits it with his chest, or if he hit it with his nose, we know that. And a non-reviewable call would be the jerk down. The camera operators are trained to get the calf out of frame when the jerk comes, and so it would be catastrophic for rodeo if we were slow motioning that back and you got to see a calf get jerked down and it was in slow motion. That's the opposite of what everybody's trying to accomplish. And so and we've had people challenge that because, a couple of our rules that are slightly different than PRCA's is it's bell collar catch only, and they got to stay on their feet. And so that's not popular with the tie down ropers in some cases, or most cases it's not, but it's what's best for rodeo. If we're going to make rodeo more palatable for network audiences and sponsorship, it's important that we're able to put those type of rules in there, but not everything is reviewable. But we list what is reviewable so that, if they come to the official and they say, hey, I want to challenge, they have to do it before the next person competes, and it has to be a reviewable offense.
I have a clarification question before my next official question, Bobby, and that is, having worked for the PBR for a very long time when they formed the first 16 years, there was a situation, I don't know if it's still like this, but it was such that if you challenged a call and you were wrong, at least for a very long time, you had to pay $500 so that they didn't just have everybody challenging every single call, right? And I don't know if that's still the case or not, but in the WCRA, out of curiosity, if you challenge a call and you as the athlete were wrong, is there any penalty for that, or it's just?
It's yes, that's a good question, and it's written in the rule book that they could be penalized for it, but it's sort of at the official's discretion. If it was frivolous,
what would be the penalty?
It would be that. It would be a $500, up to a $500 fine. So if they're frivolous and they're just being ridiculous, then yeah, they could impose a fine on them. But we haven't to date. We haven't had that. Okay. Haven't had that trouble.
So a distinguishing factor, Knowles, in this. So with Bobby and the WCRA, something is only reviewed if it's challenged. Okay, I understand it's being reviewed in real time, but only if it's challenged. Are you telling me, Steve, or our audience that replay official will be watching all of the competitive runs, and if the judges make a mistake on the 5 points that you brought up, he will overrule them, and his stance will be final?
If the judge makes a mistake by calling the violation. If he makes a mistake and has a non-call, no. But every broken barrier will be automatically reviewed in real time in all 3 events. Yes, you're correct. If he can overturn the decision made in the arena on a call, that call will be reversed.
So, for example, in the bareback riding, a guy goes out, he misses him out. The judge doesn't throw a flag. Nothing can happen, even though the replay judge sees that he missed him out. The flip side of that is guy goes out, he gets flagged for missing him out on the left side. Your replay officials are looking at it immediately, and they can overturn that call. Is that correct?
Correct. We hope we have it overturned before the guy gets off on the pickup man is our goal.
Is the PRCA looking at buck off time too?
We are not yet, Greg. We don't have the clock embedded yet. That's in the future. That's our next step. But it's not this time. And I think that's really important to have, because that's the most, like Bobby said, that's probably the most biggest call to look at that the fans can actually see.
I would love, Bobby, if you could take it on next to give us maybe a couple of examples, because the WCRA has used instant replay for quite a long time. Could you give us like a couple of examples of like maybe the example that's like your poster example of when it went great and made a huge impact to a cowboy, and maybe if there was one time that sticks out as like a glitch that you've since worked on that was kind of a tough learning curve moment.
Well, like use Days of 47 as an example. Tyler Waguespack had a barrier that would have prevented him from making the final round. He challenged it. It was overturned. It was proven that there was a mechanical malfunction. He goes on and wins $25,000. You know, we've had other cases when sort of the same instance where Cody Snow and Junior Nogata are in the final round at Stampede at the E and get flagged out for a crossfire, and it was not overturned. And, you know, they weren't happy about it, but they were flagged out for crossfire in the arena. And then when it was reviewed, there wasn't anything that, you know, would constitute overturning it. And so we've seen both. But, you know, Tommy Joe, tell me if you remember this. You remember in 2009 when Luke Branquino in the 10th round at the NFR throws his steer really fast, like this is to win a world championship, and is flagged out because he loses contact with the steer. And that was the call in the arena, and the call stood. Well, then when we went to Albuquerque in the ERA, the first time that we ever had a replay challenge was in the steer wrestling. Stockton Graves had a barrier that he challenged. It was overturned. The very next guy was Luke Branquino. And since we hauled the same 12 steers around with us, everybody knew the one that they wanted. And they had that white-faced steer that everybody was 3-something on every time. Well, Luke has him. Airplanes this steer. He hits, same thing, gets flagged out in the arena for losing contact. And then he challenges it. And it was concluded that he had contact with the steer when he hit and called for time, and he's 3 flat and wins. And so just imagine, like, to me, like the NFR is an easy one to cherry pick from, because it seems like there's always somebody who has their whole career come down to one call that happens in the arena. And it's never that somebody on the officiating side's trying to do something malicious. It's just stuff happens so fast. And in a lot of cases, like Steve brought up, my first time in the NFR, there would have been nothing challengeable about mine unless I thought there was a 6-second whistle. But, you know, in Luke's case, cost a, world championship. And so, like, I just feel like there's always going to be just weird stuff that happens in a split second that deserves a chance to be reviewed, especially when there's a lot of money on the line.
For sure. And like over the course of this conversation today, Luke was the first one I thought of, and Marcus Costa, he's got one gold buckle, but there was a very questionable call a few years ago where most of the insiders thought, it was just a call made in the heat of battle that cost him a gold buckle, and how many mark out, gold buckle swings have happened or whatever. I wanted to ask you, before Tommy Joe asks the next official question, if you, Bobby, have ever regretted having instant replay. Has there ever been a time or something that happened that you're like, man, is it even worth it? Have you ever been sorry to take this leap?
No, I mean, anytime you're trying something new, there is going to be hiccups. And I think that's why, your last podcast, you guys spent some time talking about how rodeo as an industry is risk adverse and doesn't want to take chances and is slow to move. And you open with a guy who breaks 2 cervical vertebrae in his neck. He doesn't have time. Like, to me, it's important that we get it right now, or at least our best efforts to get it right. And those efforts will evolve and improve as time goes on. But, we've seen and talked about people who have their career ended doing this in a blink, have their life taken from them in a blink, or spend a whole career doing something where just one break makes the difference, And so in every instance, I'm obviously passionate about this And so I have no regrets in trying to improve it. And, has it always worked perfectly? Has the outcome always been exactly right? No, but human error has never been perfect either. And so I just feel like it's, we got to do the best we can with what we have in front of us.
Fair enough. Tommy Joe, you're up.
Well, I think we've covered kind of through the course of conversation, would you say would either one of you say that there's any drawbacks to instant replay? Like, are there any competitive negatives that you can think of to it?
Well, for me, like when you asked if another competing athlete can make a challenge, that just goes against everything that the Cowboy Code is about. Like if Steve missed his horse out and I'm standing there, I just got done riding and I see it and they didn't throw the flag, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to go challenge it. And that's just the way these guys are wired. I mean, they all compete against each other and then they all get in the same rig and drive to the next place. And if somebody needs something, they all pitch in and help each other. And so that's where when you ask that, it's tough to quantify and print, but that one sort of takes care of itself. If rodeo gets to the point where that's not the case, then that could be a problem and may need to be revisited. But in
the opposite situation, it could be that you, Bobby, or say Casey Field, misses one out or whatever. Well, somebody else, technically somebody else could say, well, I don't really think you did. And somebody else could throw the flag in his favor, right?
Yeah, and that's true. And then if you don't have 12 individual camera angles to, you do have all these eyeballs. And so currently we're relying on a couple of middle-aged guys with failing eyesight to make the calls in split second and not make a mistake. And that's the reality of it. And so in my opinion, anything that we can do to improve on that has got to be better. Not trying to undermine those two guys, not trying to, put anything negative about it. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, I haven't ever judged, but like when I've done rodeo clinics and I've stood out in the arena and I've tried to, stay out of the way, keep from getting run over and be able to focus on my surroundings and what the rider's doing and what the horse is doing. And then be able to, tell him what I thought as soon as he got off. It's not that easy. And so I just think because of the nature of the fast pace and the stakes that are up and the level of competition, we're splitting hairs in every discipline these days with what wins and what might win fourth. Like, that's why I just think the more eyeballs and the more cameras, the more views that we have to try to get it right, the better.
Steve, any cons on your side?
Well, yeah, in our business, and I'll list the top 10 rodeos. If we try to implement everywhere, every arena is so unique and different, from Cheyenne to Calgary to the NFR. Las Vegas is probably an easy one with the small arena, but it's hard to do the same thing at Cheyenne. I just don't know if it's possible to get the same angles. Of course, you can have it implemented, but I don't know if you can aggressively go by this criteria and get it right every time. And, as we know, cost, I'm going to throw out costs. Committee's going to have to consume or assume some cost here on this. It's not free, when you bring in a company and bring in all these extra cameras. And I know it's well worth the dollar, but I'm not sure every committee is willing or has the extra dollars to spend on this.
Well, wouldn't you think that the governing body or the contestants that this impacts most should be responsible for funding getting it right?
This sure could be. You're talking, I don't know what it costs per rodeo or per performance, but I'm sure it's a couple of grand a performance to do this, at most rodeos. At the end of the day, like Bobby said earlier, we have 600 to 700 rodeos. If we want to implement it across the board, that's a heck of a lot of funding that somebody has to come up with.
Well, funding does have to happen. And Bobby, I will say I stand behind my comment that rodeo is risk adverse. Rodeo as a whole, I believe, is risk adverse. Now, hats off to the WCRA and other people out there that try new things at their own expense to make it better. I didn't say that there weren't people out there doing it. This industry does move slow. It is risk adverse. Even the forward thinking people have to take seriously the culture and how this is going to be taken within the industry, or they can be exiled. You can quickly be kicked off as a kook. So I do think that rodeo is risk adverse. They move slow. Steve admittedly said that, the bigger governing bodies that are membership oriented are just like the federal government. It takes a long time because a lot of people have to agree, and the losers don't always see it the way the winners do, and so that can take a long time. But while we're making steps forward, my point is this: they have sensors and cameras, but nobody could pay for it. For $1 million, I guarantee you, for millions of dollars of investment, we could figure out a way to put sensors on all of the animals, and AI could actually score an animal based on its height, its torque. That stuff's being done now. They know the torque of a bull and the height of a bull. So, we're still as an industry significantly behind, in fairness, other sports industries, but hats off to the WCRA and hats off to the PRCA. You guys are real conservative about this kind of stuff, and hats off that you're moving in that direction. Hats off to the WCRA. In fairness, Bobby, for doing, like you said, it started in the RA. I thought Luke whirlwind that steer at Redmond, Oregon, but I can't remember for sure. But I remember when it happened, and it was like 2.8 seconds or 3 flat. And I remember everybody's guts kind of rolling in a knot, thinking, "Uh-oh." And that's the deal. There's best ways to do instant replay, which we've discussed on here. But I still think any camera angles, if there's one of the 6 that are out there that sees a mistake, that mistake should be corrected. Now, I think the next step is fix the mistakes, all the mistakes, right? That's a big step. But if you can tell it was wrong, whether it was a call or no call, the right guy, and I think we all agree the right guy should win. What say you?
Well, all you need is conclusive evidence that either supports or goes against the call that was made in the arena. And so, yes, every single angle from every, in every instance doesn't always give you that conclusive or inconclusive evidence, but you already have, like I said, just 2 guys or 1 guy in most cases, vantage point and view. And so if there's 1 camera angle that supports it and makes the outcome the way it's supposed to, then it worked. And if the next one is inconclusive, you can't tell me how that's any different than when the horse turned out, the gate was in the way or whatever happened, and the guy on the ground wasn't able to get a good vantage point. Everybody does their best to get that, but it doesn't always work out that way. And so, I think that it may not be in the budget to have a dedicated replay official. We've tried, other ways where, especially in qualifying rounds or slack, where you just have a monitor where if it's challenged, the official just walks over to the fence and looks at it and is able to make a call. We use the TriCaster to get different views. And Tommy Joe, if you were doing it in 2016, you didn't, I'm not going to try to belittle Piranha, but you didn't invest millions just specifically for replay, capabilities. You all had it already. So, if we could do it, if they could do it in 2006 in the PBR, then in 2024, we ought to really be taking a hard look at it, But I think in every case where there's substantial payouts, there should be money in the budget or equipment in place to make sure that the right call is made. And that doesn't apply to the county fair rodeos, but 1 guy walking around with a camcorder and poor lighting, of course, that's not going to work. But there's enough people that watch the Cowboy channel to know that there's at least a few views that would not overturn every instance, but enough of them. The guy who just drove 18 hours in the back of a pickup, whatever, get there to ride, just wants the right call. And I think that the fans, when it comes down to it, it's about ensuring a fair competition. And that's really what it comes down to. We just want to ensure a fair competition, and we use everything at our disposal to try to do so. And I say we, I'm not trying to be like us or them. I'm just saying that I think in general, in rodeo, that's all they want. We just want to ensure a fair competition. That's what the fans pay for. That's what the athletes expect.
May the best man win is something everyone agrees. I mean, that's common ground to start with, right? I mean, no one disagrees with that. And most new things are going to have some growing pains. And in fairness to professional rodeo, the PBR is one event. It also is privately held, and so but also to your point, Bobby, which is also fair. 2006 to 2024 is a lot of time, and so we have to move forward. And I think it feels like what everybody on this call agrees with is, may the best man win. If it's done right, what is the downside? Nobody can really, if it's done efficiently, the cost of it seems to be a huge, question mark, how it would be funded, especially when you're not at the biggest rodeos that do have state-of-the-art technology for different views. I mean, like, for example, Houston already has the views that we need here, correct?
They have the views we need, but we cannot. They don't give us access to control the cameras for the views. This coming year at Houston, we'll bring in a separate company to handle that. It's just, they have the best state-of-the-art facility, but we don't have the control of those views. That's where our problem is. Gotcha. At a big rodeo like Houston or San Antonio.
Well, the other con, or at least worth considering, is you have to maintain the credibility of the judging staff and a separation of church and state. Because at the same time, what you don't want is for it to ever look like replay was used to benefit anything but the competitor. And I think that's something we should all, I feel sorry for every referee in every sport and a judge in a rodeo, but separating those, in the other sports, the officials stay at different hotels, right? Of course, and all of that is in an effort to make sure that nobody can ever point to anybody and say that the league did anything to rig the game. And I think that's something that needs to be always in our forefront, because credibility, I think, is what's most important in all of this. Along the way. And I do need to shout out a couple people because I don't want to get any feedback. The IPRA in 2024 did utilize instant replay, I believe. I think I'm pretty correct on that. I don't know the specifics of what they used. And in fairness, the National Reining Horse Association, Cutting Horse, AQHA, Reining Cow Horse, they've been using instant replay at major events for a long, long time. And so we are slow to act, but we are acting. And we're having conversations, and that's the whole reason that Kendra and I started this podcast. So, Kendra, any final questions or thoughts, and we can see if we have any roundtable here.
Well, I feel like if we can all, work together for the greater good of rodeo, ultimately, every organization, then the whole sport wins. And so if people in general will put, petty differences aside, or, like Bobby pointed out up at the very top, there are different circumstances and different rules to abide by, and different, constraints and different circumstances, and the fair rodeo versus, the NFR or Houston, very different sets of circumstances. But if we can all keep trying to move forward for what's best for rodeo, everybody wins in that scenario. There's not a downside to that, right?
No, no. And I would just say that, I mean, as far as any, we've been busy since we started with the WCRA testing out, proving some theories right and some theories wrong. But with all of it, we're an open book. And so if there's anybody that wants to know, based on your experience, what do you think about this, or what would you do? Rules, I don't care. Like, we're about trying to make it better for rodeo. So in every case, we're more than willing to try to help advance, because rodeo has been historically organized in all these individual silos, and one doesn't talk to the other or work with the other. And that's the cowboys and cowgirls make their living putting their money up, going and competing, and hopefully winning, and they go wherever the money's at.
Rodeo's too small of a pond to have too much, infighting and whatever. And the external threats to the entire industry are tremendous. That if we don't unite as cowboy people, we're being fools.
And back to you, Tommy Joe, on how we move slow. We are the Cowboys Turtles Association originally, so I think we still move at that snail's pace at times. In my real life, I'm not that guy. I'm kind of a risk taker, act fast, and just ask for forgiveness when things don't go right. But in the PRCA, we are restricted to rules, and we work for a board. But I agree with Bobby. These people are making great, life-changing amounts of money. They're making careers out of rodeo now, not just, for a couple of years and got to go back and work on the family farm. This is a career for these guys, and it's better now. There's more money now. I'm in it for everybody. I cheer for all the cowboys making money. When they make money, we all make money. It's good for all of us.
Well, good products help the sport. In defense of the PRCA, you guys have set up through a course of that turtle walking very slow for a long time. You've got a set of standards that are pretty solid. And that's what you lean on and lean into. And you take a really close eye at looking at, how do you change those standards? The one thing that that all of rodeo is going to instinctively have is that we have 9 different sports within one sport. We got to take that into consideration. There's 9 totally different sport pieces in our one sport we call rodeo, all of them with different needs, different wants, different problems. And so you've got a house of 600 senators, all debating the issue. And it's very, very difficult. It's difficult, I'm sure, for Bobby. It's difficult for you, Steve. It's difficult for us that put on rodeos, just trying to figure out how to do slack that doesn't screw somebody else up. So I can understand the nature of why we move slow and we're risk adverse, and I recognize that. It's just, can we get the masses to understand that everybody has to give a little bit for all of us to succeed, right? Sit down, have a conversation, give a little bit so that we can all succeed. What say you guys to that concept of, there's just people that I can name a few people in both sides here that, it's like, no, this is the way it is because this works. Well, it works in your particular part of the discipline, but does it work for the whole?
Agreed. I've argued with you a lot, Tommy Joe, over the last few years, so I know exactly what you're coming from. It's your way or the highway.
Okay, Sledgehammer. Yeah. Well, I am a little aggressive type A or whatever it is. Sorry about that, but we really don't want to talk about my personality because then we'll have to edit this. I have a giant pool of people that don't like me, and that's okay. It's all right. You can be one of them, Steve. All right. Okay. To wrap this up, any final thoughts? The only roundtable thing that I had that hasn't been covered, Bobby, I think I read or somewhere in the history that I heard, and it may have been in our past together, but instant replay would have changed. There's a specific instance in your career where instant replay would have made a difference. Is that, am I on the right deal? And can you tell us what that was? That might feed the passion, is what I'm saying.
It was related to the spur out. It was, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 11 or 8. Anyways, it had Steve, you remember Moulin Rouge, little roan horse, the Grounings. She wasn't very big. Anyway, she was really bucked. She was hard. And I had her and felt like I had her spurred out. And one of the judges, I don't remember who it was, said, well, you had them up there, but you were overreaching, so I'm not sure there was contact. And so that's one of those instances that, like, to me, I'd like, if I saw the replay and I saw that I was overreaching and didn't have contact, because the rule simply says you have to have contact with your spur at this certain point on the horse's anatomy when their front feet hit, when they cross this certain line. Okay, so if it was conclusive on video, one way or the other, then everybody can live with it. But when you're a whole year and look, you're a rare individual if you get a chance to compete at the NFR once. And so there's no guarantee that you get a chance to go back again, much less have, a world championship implication in one of those rounds. And so I was fortunate enough to get to go there more than once and have that scenario play out a few times. But that I think is what you're talking about, Tommy Joe. And then that's one of the cases where if there had been instant replay and it was ruled one way or ruled the other, then it sort of puts it to bed. But however long ago it was, you're asking and I'm still talking about it. I'm not like walking around holding a grudge about it or anything, but I'm just saying, like, there's no closure. There's no closure when one guy thinks it's one way and one guy thinks it's the other. And so then, to me, I think then, that affects credibility, right or wrong. If it's right, then it can be backed up. If it's wrong, then the right call is made, and no doubt the guys standing in the arena don't want the wrong outcome. They just saw it the way they saw it, and they have to react. I mean, Steve, I'll ask you, but you, in any call, because it's so split second, you train yourself to have the right reactions, just like the guys who are competing, correct?
That's correct. And you just try to react on instinct. And Bobby, I could tell you at the National Finals Rodeo, I've made, and it wasn't on you, one in particular call at this mark out. And it was the last guy out when I was jogging down for the steer rest, and I looked up at the replay and I was dead wrong. And that was, I think it was on Stephen Dent at one time or another. But I recall that, I just was sick that night and still kind of regret making that call. But at the time, I was 100% right in my mind for at least 20 seconds. Then pretty
sure.
quick.
And because it's a reaction. And so then in that case, if it was Stephen, he probably felt like he was right too with his reactions. But then the only way to break the tie would have been to be able to have a video review of it, whether it was multiple angles or not. But if one's conclusive, then to me that tells the tale. And it wasn't because you weren't trying to do a good job or because you had anything against the guy. It's just the way it just happens that fast. I mean, I can't imagine how hard that job is to do it, day in and day out, and expect to be perfect. And so, like, the officials that I've talked to that have used instant replay, they don't view it as as something that's critical to them or undermining their call. They view it as it's almost like a safety net, because if they can just make a quick reaction if it happens. And so, like, here's another one I've always wanted to ask somebody like you. If you're flagging a slack and it's in the fall and the team rope and steers are wore out and they're wanting to follow and stuff, and you've seen this where they get in a rhythm and they're so close to the crossfire that one is and one isn't, and they both look pretty much the same, but this steer leads and that one doesn't. And then I've seen it when that happens, these guys circle like vultures around the flagger or the line judge. And nobody is probably 100% right, because it all happens so fast. And sometimes the conditions make certain calls happen more often than others. And so I would think if I was flagging, I would want to have instant replay in that case, where I could say, look, I reacted and I flagged it the way I saw it, and let this be the safety net to choose whether it was conclusive or inconclusive and where the call goes. But
I would love that. I don't look at it as maybe when I was younger, I probably would have been offended by it because I had a little more ego. But today, I think it is a tool that the officials, it just allows them to do their job. Now, at no time do I think an official should make a call based on they have replay to back them up. If they're not sure, don't make the call. But make the call if the review proves them right or wrong. It's not a mark against them. It's just they're doing their job. And when you look at the NFL reviews and replays, most of them guys are spot on. And I think our guys will get spot on because it's a rate. We have a way to evaluate them now and rate them based on that. I think it's a great tool for the officiating crews.
Well, the NFL and all those others, they have a whole host of officials. Like it amazes me when they call a guy safe at the base, and I'm like, how in the heck did they get that right? And they do so often. But they also in the NFL, they got specific referees that are watching for specific things, which would mean that in rodeo we would have an official that's dedicated to watching. I mean, the only thing they do is watch this, that, or another, and that isn't always the case. And that's a lot, like Bobby said, that's a lot to put on. That's a lot to put on. As we go on, Greg's kind of our guy that hasn't been wearing a hat since he was at birth. Even Kendra has been in this. When you hear this conversation, Greg, is there any pieces of this that maybe some of our listeners out there would want to ask, or something that we've skipped over and assume people understand that might need to be clarified?
I think it's two different approaches to replay. And I think people need to understand that, where, the PRCA is just, monitoring it, making sure the call's right, while the WCRA has the challenge rule. It's two different situations. And I don't know if there's one better than the other. I think they're both good. I think the important thing is having the replay and being able to make the right call for these guys. And what you're just talking about, I think it also helps the judges in the fact that it would probably help them become better judges, because they can kind of evaluate what they just saw. And then when they see the replay, maybe, there's something that they can learn from that and become. And like you said, NFL judges refs are much better now. And I think it is because of the replay that they can see stuff a little bit better, and it helps them hone their skills. So I feel like the replay is a great addition to rodeo. I do think the challenge is implementing it across the board. And I don't know, when you get down to a smaller rodeo with budgets and stuff, there may be levels of replay that have to be established and understood, that this rodeo will have this level of replay. But I think replay in general, even like you said, as one camera that can help somebody make the right decision, I think that's where we need to go.
Well, if a rodeo pays out enough money that it's 1/10 of your step to the NFR, it should be right. Kendra, what do you think?
I would love to make a comment based on what basically every single one of you guys have made a point that has me thinking this. In a perfect world, we would have expert judges in every different event. In fairness, you have rodeo judges going, maybe someone rode, bulls, and even at the highest level, and he's supposed to make a real-time crossfire call. It's not even a fair ask. So I would think that the judges every judge wants to get it right, but there's no, Ty Murray really hit this home with me many, many years ago. He's like a brother to me. And when he was ruling the world, we spent so much time together. And he said that what turned the corner for him in his career was when he had done it enough and got to the point where he had enough experience that everything happened in slow motion for him. And the only way that you see a team roping run and the slow motion it takes to make a real-time crossfire call is if you have actually done it yourself at the very highest level. Someone who roped calves their whole career, to expect them to nail maybe a mark out or whatever, or the degree of difficulty for a bull or a bucking horse in real time, for him to really know when he's never done it at the highest level, it's not a fair ask. So I would think, now I know that's getting beyond what instant replay is ever going to do, but the judging, the whole system, because of lack of funding, like you say, in an NFL football game, how many officials do they have? They've got it all covered. Meanwhile, we have all these different events. There's no one that walks the face of the earth who has expert level experience in every event, period. So that's just
the only thing I would say, just to maybe challenge your opinion a little bit, is y'all talked about how good the NFL officiating is. I would say most of those people didn't play football, especially at the professional level. And even I know that there's at least one referee that's a female that I'm sure she didn't have an NFL, career. And so I think that for, Tommy Joe said it, there's 9 different disciplines in rodeo. And so, Steve, in his interim position of being the, lead of the officiating program, he's got his hands full just keeping enough judges to go to the rodeos that he has to send 2 or 3 and sometimes 4, but not, who in here is been an, expert in every discipline. I just think that I feel like that if the organizing body sets forth the criteria, and the criteria is solid, this is what we're looking for in each discipline, as far as this is what's marked and this is what isn't, and these are the calls, and it's managed correctly, then I feel like it has a chance. If these guys don't make enough money to be able to, if you're an NFL official, that is what you do. You don't build fence or sell furniture during the week, and rodeo doesn't have enough money in it currently that these guys could be either officiating a rodeo or watching film and critiquing their performance from the previous week all that week before they go to the next one. But I feel like I need to stick up for the judges a little bit on that one, because I've heard that we've got that criticism quite a bit. So I'll take Mark Gomes for an example. Mark Gomes is a world champion bareback rider, and since he's been done riding bareback horses, he's flagged tens of thousands of team roping runs. He goes almost every weekend and flags a team rope, and he takes his job very, very seriously. And he's been raked over the coals when he's flagged somebody out for crossfire or whatever at a WCRA event, and they're like, "Why do you got some bareback rider, doing the team rope?" Harry Rose is somebody who's very well respected in the, as a team roping flagger, and he rode broncs, the ropes too, but I mean, he was a saddle bronc rider. So, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily.
If you took anything I said as an attack on judges, I said it wrong.
No, and I don't, Kendra. I just feel
like I'm defending judges, because it's impossible to their job. The only job that in rodeo that might be worse, that I would prefer to be tarred and feathered, would be to be the PRCA Director of Rodeo Administration, whose job it is to uphold the rules that we all want, but you get the phone calls when everybody's pissed off, period. And I've seen it. I worked in the office for many years. It's so absolutely, I think we're all saying this would be a very helpful tool to help judges who have a very difficult job. And every single one of those guys is may the best man win. They want to get it right. But like Steve still remembers a call years ago that maybe he missed in real time, not because he wasn't giving it his guts, but because it happened so fast. And I was like, damn, it's easy for everybody watching the replay on the Cowboy channel to get it right. I mean, but that guy doesn't have that. He's doing it as it happens, and it happens in a half of a blink.
Are you saying that everybody on the Cowboy channel in their leather recliner is getting it right, Kendra? Is that what you're saying? When they post on social that, they think so. Well, hey, a quick ag note. The judging officials, if you kind of look at our judging officials, it all has to do with money and all of this that we're talking about really at the end of the day. The NFL officials, by the way, Bobby, to your point, they get almost $12,000 a game. That's $200,000. That's their job. And they start young and they want to be a pro official. No offense to our pro officials, but usually that can sometimes be what you want to do when you can't be what you want to be anymore. And that's not always the case, but a lot of times, right? I want to stay in rodeo, so I'm going to train myself to be a judge. And so I think it's not fair. It's not fair at all for me, and I do it all the time, for me to compare rodeo to the NFL, because look at the billions of dollars in that. However, I do think the NFL is the premium sports property. So if we aspire to grow, we should look at those people, even if we don't have the money that they have.
But if we're going to hope and aspire to get to that place, then we have to do the things to make rodeo palatable enough for large audiences and sponsorship to get involved in media to bring it to that level.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Right. But I mean, this is part of it. This is part of it. These are steps, taken to try to get it to that point. So,
well, in fairness, final word from our two guests. We'll start with you, Steve, then Bobby, and then we'll wrap up this episode because I think you guys got places to be. Steve, what say you? Kind of final wrap-up thoughts.
I'd like to thank Bobby, too, for especially his support of the officials. He took the words out of my mouth. And Kendra, I didn't take it personally when you were saying that. But thanks, Bobby. And I appreciate the opportunity for you allowing me to come on here and have my voice, my opinion. And I think me and Bobby agree on one thing. What we really want is when we leave this rodeo business, we want to be better than when we started. And I think we all want that. I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning. I'm sure Bobby feels the same way. But I think it's in just the last 4 or 5 years, look at how well it's gotten and how good. The money's crazy. So thank you for the opportunity. We'll move forward on our review, and maybe 5 years from now, we'll have a different problem we have to worry about.
Bobby?
Yeah, and thank you all for airing this out. I hope that you get some good feedback from it. And look, Our slogan is we want to do business with people who want to do business with us. We're all trying to row in the same direction to make rodeo better. When I reached out to Tommy Joe and Kendra last week after their podcast, I was listening to last week's podcast and I was kind of grinding my teeth because I felt like they were talking about problems that we have been working towards solutions on, and nobody acknowledged that we had been working towards those solutions. And so that was sort of what spurred this conversation. And I appreciate the opportunity to get on and sort of air out our viewpoints. But, the bottom line is everybody just wants to make rodeo better. And if somebody's doing something that's helping, then I think it needs to be acknowledged and then we can build on that. But if we just sweep it under the rug and pretend like it doesn't happen, then we just stay stuck where we're at, which is not good enough.
Kendra, final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up.
I just appreciate this conversation and everybody just kind of taking all the filters off and talking about it. Bottom line, may the best man win when it comes to, judging rodeo and progress. If we all continue to work together, have open communication and conversation, and keep our eye on the ball of doing what's best to progress rodeo and have it boom into the future, that's what's best for everyone.
We want to thank all of you. Thank you, Bobby Mote. Thank you, Mr. Knowles. Thank you for joining us for episode 30 of No Spin Rodeo. Join us in the next couple of weeks where Kendra and I will take our Rolodex, our iPhones, our All Access passes to try to bring topics of conversation in an effort to continue to grow what we all love, what it means to be a cowboy. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.